If you're studying English grammar by yourself using a grammar book, but you feel like you're not improving, you might be doing it wrong. Maybe not. Maybe you just need some time. But today I'm gonna show you an alternative method of learning grammar through self-study that's been really working for me. Hey, my fellow English learner! Let's say you have English Grammar News for Intermediate Learners by Murphy. It's a great book, by the way, but not the only one out there. And you can find so much information about grammar online. But how can you make certain that you remember grammar and are able to use it spontaneously and fluently without a lot of mistakes? I know that some people enjoy going through grammar topics one by one in order, but a more effective use of your time would be learning strategically. You already know a lot of the grammar from this book, so focus on your weaknesses first. What I love about Blue Murphy is that it has a study guide at the end to help you decide which units you want to prioritize. Alternatively, you can take a few grammar tests online. Or there is a chance you already know what you're not good at. Present perfect, modals, prepositions, articles. What is the area you struggle with the most? Feel free to share in the comments. I'm really curious. So maybe you want to improve your use of tenses and you feel really unsure about the past perfect. And of course, you want to read the theory first. But wait! If it's a topic you studied in the past and is somewhat familiar to you, do the exercises first. In this way, you'll find gaps in your understanding of this grammar area and you'll prepare your brain to fully absorb and understand the theory much better. If you don't know the answer to a question, make a guess. Making mistakes is fine. They will help you learn and you can correct your answers easily because there is a key to exercises at the end of the book. After finishing the exercises, read the grammar rules and explanations, slowly and carefully. I usually pay a lot of attention to example sentences, trying to analyze and understand them. Simply memorizing the rules has never worked for me, as well as rereading the same parts multiple times. Here comes a really important part of my studying process: creating questions that I can use to check my understanding of the topic later. It usually goes something like this. Question number 1. Past perfect structure plus contractions. How is the past perfect organized? Can I recreate this table later? The second and third questions can be: what is the difference between the present perfect and the past perfect? And what is the difference between the past simple and the past perfect? Sometimes I also translate a few example sentences into my native tongue and use them as additional questions. So the questions are done, and for me, that's enough of studying for one day. Now you need some time to forget the grammar you've been studying. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but we create connections in our brain better by trying to recall the somewhat forgotten information repeatedly. And that is why you're just gonna take a rest or focus on something besides the past perfect. The next day, you want to take a blank piece of paper and write down everything you remember about the past perfect. Importantly, you're not looking at the questions you created yesterday yet. You're just writing down anything that comes to your mind, including anything you're not really sure about. And after doing that, you answer the questions. They actually contain some clues, like a connection to other tenses, so you'll have a pretty good idea about this topic when you're done. Try to answer the questions without peeking at the theory. and sometimes this can be really challenging. And I usually leave blank spaces or question marks in places that I feel I'm not really sure about. Now it's time to check the answers, correct any mistakes, and fill in some blank spaces. With some complicated grammar topics, I usually have quite a few unanswered questions at the beginning, but as I continue to study, I have fewer and fewer of them. I usually study like this for a few days in a row, and when I'm pretty confident in understanding the materials, I review this topic in maybe a week and then in maybe a month. So I give myself plenty of time to consolidate the information and get used to this grammar topic. However, even if you've answered all the questions correctly and you feel like you understand the topic, it still doesn't mean that you've mastered this grammar structure. You need some practice. With some of the more difficult grammar areas, I look for more exercises on the internet. If you study articles, verb tenses, conditionals, or modals, I highly recommend you to check out EnglishPage.com. They have plenty of exercises that will be checked and corrected automatically. Doing more exercises is all well and good, but this type of practice is more controlled and structured, and it doesn't prepare you for freer use of the past perfect in the real world, like in your speaking and writing. That's why you want to create sentences using this structure and maybe even whole paragraphs and stories. The types of sentences and paragraphs will depend on the grammar structure you've chosen. I can use example sentences in Blue Murphy to create my own sentences. So instead of when Sarah arrived at the party, Paul had already gone home, I can write when I walked into the kitchen, the dishes had already been washed. I wish. Ideally, you should have your writing checked by a teacher or native speaker, but it's not always possible, especially if you study grammar on your own. So the next best thing is to correct your mistakes by yourself. I know that your English is good enough to catch most of your serious mistakes in your usage of the past perfect, especially after you paid so much attention to the theory and the rules. Proofread your writing. Also, use a grammar checker as an additional tool of support. If your goal is to use the past perfect freely in your speaking, then you can also create sentences and speak them out loud. Interview yourself and answer various questions, trying to incorporate the past perfect structure into your answers. It can be more difficult to catch your mistakes in this way, but if you record yourself and then transcribe everything you spoke about on paper or on your computer, you'll have a more visual representation of how well you can use this grammar structure. I understand that most of the things I mentioned before are not exactly super fun to do, apart maybe from creating sentences and stories with the grammar structure of your choice. But there is actually something really enjoyable you can do to improve your grammar, and it's listening to and reading really fun materials in English. It gives you a lot of exposure to different grammar structures, and you internalize a lot of these grammar structures with time. And it happened to me in English, and it's happening to me in the other languages I'm studying. It's working. Reading has been especially helpful for that. And did you know that there is a difference between extensive reading for fun and intensive reading for specific purposes? You can learn about it more here. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time with more awesome language content!